Hi, I'm Otis from Premier Truck Group, SelecTrucks of Kansas City. And I want to talk to you about a question I hear a lot. And that is, why does this DD15 have a 400 horsepower motor? And man, I hear that as an objection a lot of times because people want 455 horsepower, 505 horsepower. They even want to turn up the horsepower on the 400 horsepower, thinking it might get them more power. And so let's talk about that for a minute. Well, first of all, these Cascadias with the DD15 and the 400 horsepower with 1750 foot-pounds of torque on the transmission, the DT12 transmission, they have been integrated to work together, to communicate together. And I have the information from Detroit Powertrain right here in my hands. And it says the integrated Detroit powertrain in the new Cascadia is fuel efficient by design. And here's the first thing to consider is some of the best engineers in the world have tried to figure out how to get the best economy and still have the best performance. And downspeeding is the technical term. They downspeed the engine, they slow the engine down, but they speed up the rear axle. Now, all of this is done through the integrated Detroit powertrain system. So you have the Detroit engine, the Detroit transmission, and the Detroit axles. They all communicate with each other in order to achieve the optimum fuel economy. And really, fuel economy may be the first concern. And then also performance is a huge concern. So by downspeeding the engine's not turning as fast, but it still has a very high power curve. And with the 1750 foot-pounds of torque that the engine produces, then it has more torque than a 505 horsepower in a similarly spec'd Freightliner Cascadia. Now that's interesting because most 505s that I see have 1650 torque. So you got more power, more work that is able to be done with the 400 horsepower. So by slowing the engine down, and again, I'm going to read this from the Detroit publication here. It says, dropping the engine speed reduces the number of fuel injections, dramatically improving the fuel economy. And that makes sense. If you slow the engine down, it's not taking as much fuel to operate. So they've designed it where that at cruising speed, at road speed, it has a lower RPM. To do that, they have to speed up the rear axle. So that's why it has the 2.16 rear axle. But the big question, I guess, is what about power? Is it going to have enough power to do the work that I need to do? Can I get over the hills? Can I get over the mountains? And I'm not an engineer, and I've never really been able to explain that so a customer can understand it and I guess really believe it, because it seems like more horsepower means more power. But I had a guy come in the other day, and he was saying he wanted a 505 horsepower, minimum 455. And so we talked about it, and I tried to explain downspeeding to him, and we talked through why that most trucks now have 400 horsepower. And so I couldn't really get through to him. But then I noticed that the truck that he was driving was a fleet truck. So I said, well, let me ask you about your truck. Does it get over the hills okay? Does it pull okay? And he goes, oh yeah, it does fine. It gets over the mountains and it does real good. I go, well, let's go out and take a look at your truck and see what it actually has in it. So we went and opened the door, and I showed him that his truck had 400 horsepower and 1,750 pounds of torque. And really that settled the question for him. He bought a truck with 400 horsepower because he knew how it would perform. And that is really what most fleets understand. They're not trying to spec a truck that would be weak and not perform the way it needs to. They've got to keep their drivers happy, and they want it to do the job that they have. And so this 400 horsepower with 1750 torque and a higher speed rear axle, this integrated powertrain is what almost all the fleets are using. Almost all the fleets are using now. Also, thinking about saving fuel, you got to consider that you can save big money if you can get better fuel economy. So just increasing your fuel economy by, let's say, 2 miles per gallon. Calculate that over 100,000 miles, and that can be a $25,000 savings for you. So think about $25,000 in your pockets instead of the fuel station. So that may settle it. If you have any input on this, please put it in the comments. I'd like to have your input and see if we can help people to understand that 400 horsepower with 1750 torque with the integrated Detroit powertrain is a great option for your truck.